First up, a change in the nation's capital. Today, the Wizards fired longtime team president Ernie Grunfeld.
It's time for a blow-up. It did work, Ernie Grunfeld. It did work.
The Wizards have parted ways with team president Ernie Grunfeld after 16 seasons with the organization.
Grunfeld drafted All-Stars John Wall and Bradley Beal, reached the postseason in 8 of his 16 seasons on the job, not this one.
Scott Brooks.
Say that again.
Gotta go.
And the franchise never advanced beyond the second round during his tenure.
What a disgrace that has taken place in the nation's capital.
Over the past decade or so, the Washington Wizards had enough talented players and a good enough core to potentially contend for an Eastern Conference title. But after a lot of disappointing events, General Manager Ernie Grunfeld was removed from his position in DC. Hey everyone, my name is Ask the Truth, and today we're going to talk about how despite the various talented rosters the Wizards had, they would never once win 50 games in a season in the 16 years Grunfeld was GM. Basically how this is going to work is that I'm going to list the good and bad things Ernie Grunfeld did as GM and how that affected the success of the team. That includes trades, drafting, contracts, signings, as well as things that were just out of his control. We'll take it season by season, starting with some pretext. So without further ado, I present to you a timeline of the Washington Wizards in the Ernie Grunfeld era. The Washington Wizards as a franchise have been one of the least successful franchises in the past 40 years aside from the Knicks, with their last championship being in 1978 and their last 50-win season being the following year in 1979. In the 02-03 season, Michael Jordan played his final season in the NBA and got a 37-45 record with the Wizards, which was enough to just barely miss the playoffs. Jordan then retired for the third and final time in a weird colored jersey. Washington wanted a fresh start, so they hired veteran GM and former player Ernie Grunfeld to be their GM and president of basketball operations, which starts this whole journey. In the 2003 offseason, second-year guard Gilbert Arenas of the Golden State Warriors had just come off a year where he averaged 18.3 points, 6.3 assists, and 4.7 rebounds while going home with the Most Improved Player award. Grunfeld decided he wanted some fresh young talent on the squad, so he signed him to a 6-year, $60 million contract. That year, the combo of Arenas and Larry Hughes would get them to a 25-57 record while putting up some solid stats on a low efficiency. Thankfully, the Wizards ended up with the 5th pick, and that later became Devin Harris. They traded him, Christian Laettner, and Jerry Stackhouse to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for Antoine Jamison. This next season is when Wizards fans start seeing some success, because in the 04-05 season, the core of Antoine Jamison, Gilbert Arenas, and Larry Hughes were able to propel the team to 20 more wins from the previous season, with Jamison and Arenas both making the All-Star team as well. Now they had a 45-37 record, and that put them up against a post-Jordan Chicago squad in the first round that they were able to dismantle pretty quickly. Unfortunately, they would meet Dwayne Wade and Shaq in the second round and get swept. That was fine though, because for the first time in a while, the future was bright in DC. During the 2005 offseason, Larry Hughes decided to leave and go play with LeBron in Cleveland, but they were able to make up for it pretty quickly by trading Kwame Brown and Laren Crawford for Caron Butler, while also stealing Andre Blosh with the 49th pick in the 05 draft. The following season, the Wizards with their big three of Arenas, Jamison, and Butler would go 42-40 behind Agent Zero, averaging a career high in points. Unfortunately for them, they would be matched up against now former teammate Larry Hughes and a young LeBron James making his first playoff appearance with everything to prove, while also not having home court advantage. The Wizards did the best they could, but LeBron is LeBron, and he put up an insane stat line of 35.7 points, 5.7 assists, and 7.5 rebounds, and 51% shooting and 38% from 3. Arenas would also put up great numbers that series, but it all went to waste when he choked away a pair of free throws at the end of overtime in Game 6 and wound up losing the game by 1, which still haunts him today. The 06-07 season is where the bad luck would start to kick in. Arenas would again put up great regular season numbers, but a few games before the playoffs, he would tear his MCL in a game against Charlotte and be rolled out for the rest of the postseason. The Wizards would finish with a record of 41-41 and once again be matched up against Cleveland, except this time instead of losing in 6, they would get swept. That offseason, they would then draft Nick Young with the 16th pick, whose career thus far can be summed up with a bunch of memes and him cheating on Iggy Azalea. In the 07-08 season, the infamous big three of Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett were assembled in Boston and would immediately be considered championship favorites. If it wasn't already difficult enough for the Wizards, it was definitely about to be, because a few games into the season, Arenas would tear his meniscus in the same knee he tore his MCL just months earlier. He was expected to miss 3 months of action, but wound up missing a total of 5. He would return for the end of the season, but was ruled out of the postseason for the second year in a row to rehab his knee. Despite this, the Wizards would actually improve the record by 2 games with a record of 43-39, but without their number 1 option on the floor, they would lose in the first round to Cleveland for the 3rd straight year in a row. Now, up through this point, Grunfeld has actually made some good decisions as an executive. He would then break that streak by handing out the first of his many bad contracts, by giving an injury-riddled Gilbert Arenas a 6-year, $111 million deal, just a few million short of the max. He would then go on to select JaVale McGee with the 18th pick in that draft. And while he's had some success in the recent years, his time in DC can be summed up with a bunch of memes and a bunch of Shaq in the Fool moments. In the 08-09 season, Arenas would begin his big contract by getting his third knee surgery in September and only playing 2 games for the whole season. In December of 2008, they would partake in a 3-team trade involving a bunch of random players that, to make this simple, would have the Wizards end up with Javaris Crittenden. This may sound like a name you've never heard of before, but it'll be important later. So now we're gonna take a break for a second because I want to play a little Jeopardy with y'all. So with this number 5 pick in the 2009 draft, did Ernie Grunfeld A, use the pick to draft a future 2-time MVP after realizing Gilbert Arenas was never going to be the same player? B, trade the pick for a superstar caliber or all-star caliber player? C, just use the pick to draft a bust? Or D, trade away the pick for 2 role players that would end up leaving just a year later? I'm going to give y'all a minute to figure that one out. Alright, so if you guys guessed D, you are correct. Now your prize is, I don't know, a video of Gilbert Arenas bullying Nick Young's kid.
Do you like me? No. Then I don't like you either. What the fuck you doing?
Yeah, so basically, and arguably his worst move as an executive, Grunfeld passed up on drafting Steph Curry with the 5th pick and traded it to David Kahn, who would just waste the pick anyways, and 2 consecutive point guards not named Steph Curry for Mike Miller and Randy Foye, who would both leave a year later. Ouch. Okay, so remember that guy I mentioned before, Javaris Crittenden? This is when he becomes important, because for the first time in NBA history, we actually have authenticated video evidence as to what happened.
Hey yo, you got any threes? Go fish. No out, I win, mother hicker. Hold on there, buddy boy, you can't play a draw for as toy or last turn, it's against the rules. LMAO, what you gonna do about it? You'll see. Hey Javrical clock. What? Take your pick, you onion looking boy. Nobby, I already got one. LMAO, you finna get wrecked.
So Javaris Crittenden is the guy that Gilbert Arenas had the infamous gun alteration with. Both of them would plead guilty to misdemeanor charges and be suspended for the rest of the season. At this point, Grunfeld realized it was just time to blow it up, so he traded away Antoine Jameson and Caron Butler halfway through the season for basically nothing. While Randy Foye and Mike Miller would both leave in free agency. They did have one thing go right though. The Wizards would end up with the number 1 overall pick in the 2010 draft. Thankfully, Grunfeld will not trade this pick away for role players again, and he ended up selecting future All-Star point guard John Wall. In the 2010-2011 season, Grunfeld decided it was finally time to move on from Agent Zero and ended up trading it for Rashard Lewis in a 2nd-round pick. This paved the way for the John Wall saga to come into full effect. They finished with a 26-56 record, Wall was runner-up for Rookie of the Year, and the Wizards ended up with the 6th pick, which they would use to select Jan Vesely, a career 3.5 points per game scorer who would be out of the league by 2014. And to make things worse, the player that was selected only 5 picks later at number 11 was none other than Klay Thompson. So in the past 3 drafts, Grunfeld passed up on the opportunity to have both Splash Brothers in the backcourt. Wow. He would make up for this a year later when he drafted Bradley Beal with the 3rd overall pick. In the 2012-2013 season, Wall would miss the first 33 games of the season due to a knee injury, while the Wizards went 5-28 through that stretch. And unfortunately, that was only the beginning of Wall's injuries, as we all know. They would then end up with the 3rd overall pick for the 2nd consecutive year and draft Otto Porter Jr. In the next season, the young backcourt duo of Wall and Beal would then make a big leap and lead their team to a 44-38 record and solidify their first playoff appearance since 2008 and their first 2nd round appearance since 2005. They were also able to trade for Marcin Gortat and re-sign him in the offseason as their starting center. Coming into the 2014-2015 season, it was a general consensus among the league that Wall and Beal were the 2nd best backcourt in the NBA. Grunfeld decided it was time to add more to the young core by trading up in the draft to get Kelly Oubre Jr. They would finish with a 46-36 record, but would get matched up with the 60-win Hawks team in the 2nd round. And despite Paul Pierce basically turning back the clock by 5 years, they would still lose in 6 games. The next season, they would trade their 2016 1st-round pick for Markieff Morris, miss the playoffs, fire Randy Whitman, and then hire Scott Brooks as the next head coach. And that brings us to the 2016-2017 season. This year would mark the pinnacle of their success in the 16 years of Grunfeld's leadership. John Wall, Bradley Beal, and Otto Porter Jr. would all have career years. Grunfeld thought it was time to win now, so he would continue this trend of mortgaging their future assets for veteran talent by trading away their lottery-protected 2017 first-round pick to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for Bojan Bogdanovic. And while it was fine to trade away their first-rounder in 2016 due to it becoming no one of significance, that 2017 first-rounder, now owned by the Brooklyn Nets, became Jarrett Allen. Sound like a familiar story to y'all? The Wizards would finish with their best record since 1979 with a record of 49-33. In the first round, they would beat the Hawks in 6 and be matched up against the first-seeded Celtics team led by Isaiah Thomas, who finished top 5 in MVP voting and put up damn near 30 a game. This would end up being a top 3 non-final series in the past decade, and honestly, it deserves its own future video since it arguably could have been the best in that category. But in the end, the Celtics won in 7 games, and Isaiah Thomas outclassed John Wall in storyline and on-court play. The Wizards still saw this season as a success though, so they wanted to run it back knowing that they could only get better, and hopefully they could take the crown as top dog in the East after LeBron would eventually leave. It wouldn't be that easy though, because that offseason Sacramento decided to offer Otto Porter Jr. a 4-year $106 million contract, and because he was a restricted free agent, the Wizards' hands were forced and they matched the deal. And since John Wall had just come off an All-NBA third-team selection, he was eligible for a 4-year $170 million Supermax extension, and because he's their franchise player coming off the best year of his career, Washington would give it to him. The last thing that would happen this offseason is that Bojan Bogdanovic would leave in free agency to go play in Indiana with Victor Oladipo. So Washington gave up what was essentially Jarrett Allen for half a season of Bojan Bogdanovic. In the following season, Wall's injury issues would begin to flare up again and he missed half the season, but he was able to return for the playoffs where they would lose in 6 games to the Raptors. That following offseason, they would draft Troy Brown Jr. with the 15th pick, trade Marcin Gortat for Austin Rivers, and sign Jeff Green and Dwight Howard, which sparked up a bunch of weird Dwight Howard Kelly Oubre memes.
I like you, and I want you. Now we can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. The choice is yours.
And all of that 15 years of buildup will bring us to our final chapter. Now I wish I could say that there was a happy ending, but there really isn't. John Wall would only play 32 games for the whole season, and throughout those 32 games, there were a variety of reports talking about locker room issues, chemistry issues, management issues, anything and you can name it. At no point were they even close to playoff contention even when Wall was playing. And on January 8th, 2019, Wall would have surgery on his left heel and was expected to miss 6 to 8 months, effectively ruling him out for the rest of the season. And from that point, as if it couldn't get any worse, a month later on February 5th, Wall ruptured his left Achilles tendon by slipping and falling in his home. And now at this point, it's highly unlikely he even plays for the whole 2019-2020 season. Grunfeld then traded Kelly Oubre Jr. to the Phoenix Suns for an expiring Trevor Ariza contract, so they wouldn't be forced to overpay him like they did with Otto Porter. Speaking of which, they actually managed to get off of his contract by shipping him off to the Chicago Bulls in exchange for Jabari Parker's expiring contract. Ironically, however, as soon as he got to Chicago, he started playing like an all-star. Grunfeld would also trade away another draft pick even when it was clear they need to hold on to assets. It's hard to say what the final straw was, or even if there was one and it was just everything that's happened over the past few years, but on April 2nd, 2019, the official Washington Wizards Twitter account announced that Ernie Grunfeld was relieved from his duties as the general manager and president of basketball operations. The Wizards would finish the year with a 32-50 record. They would own the 6th best odds in the lottery to hopefully get Zion and revitalize their franchise, but they would end up with the 9th pick, sliding down 3 slots. And all of that brings us to today. A majority of the issues that were prevalent during Grunfeld's tenure had to do with trading away many future assets, giving out numerous bad contracts, and just injuries, something you just can't control. Now moving forward, the biggest obstacle is John Wall's Supermax contract. It's pretty unfortunate because just a few years ago, he was your franchise centerpiece and he was the thing propelling you forward, and now he's the thing that's anchoring you down. There's little to no chance he comes back to play in the 2019-2020 season, nor is it likely with his Achilles injury he even returns to the same form as he was before. He'll be making an average of $42 million over the next 4 years, which effectively makes this the most untradeable contract in NBA history. So whoever the Wizards do end up hiring to fill the shoes of what was Ernie Grunfeld's position needs to figure out what to do with this contract. And Wizards fans, here's a picture of my cats because There's honestly nothing I could say that'll make you feel better. And that is the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. This is my first video, keep that in mind. So if you guys have any sort of constructive criticism, thoughts, or ideas, make sure to leave them down below so I can read it. If you did enjoy, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and enable post notifications. And if you guys have any other topics you'd like for me to discuss, be sure to let me know. That's all I have for you today, so I will see you guys next time.